we are certainly privileged to speak to a very prominent and a distinguished personality, His Excellency Dr. Shashi Tharoor, former Undersecretary General at the United Nations, Member of Parliament, Thiruvananthapuram, India. Greetings to you.
How are you, Reena? Good evening.
Pleasure is ours in seeing you in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
In your opinion, what role do you see when it comes to technology playing and shaping the future of education, particularly in a developing nation such as Sri Lanka?
Well, I think technology has a lot of potential, but I think we should also acknowledge some of the limitations. The potential exists because obviously it can give you vast amounts of information with great rapidity. Now with the onset of artificial intelligence, it's made research very much simpler, to the point where you sometimes wonder, if you're a teacher, whether the work you're getting from a college student is his own or her own, or whether it's actually been written by ChatGPT. So there are advantages to the students, challenges for the teachers. All that is good, and that in many ways works. But when you look at things like online classes, I believe we should be conscious that in the education space, you can only go so far and no further with all this. During the COVID pandemic, a number of parents complained to me how difficult it was for their children to be able to just concentrate on the screen all the time. They're young people, they get distracted. Secondly, teachers said that without making eye contact, they have no real sense of how the student is absorbing the information they're giving. So in many ways, there are studies now around the world, it's not just your country or mine, which have established that students came out of the pandemic without having made the progress they would have made in the classroom. So if you had 2 years of online classes, you've learned 6 months worth, whereas you should have learned 2 years of your life in a classroom. And that has required remedial make-up courses subsequently in many institutions. I have always argued that even when it comes to normal sort of online education, video conferencing and so on, that it's best if it's supplanted by a teacher. In other words, when the course comes in, let's say somebody in Harvard is teaching you in Colombo, you may actually need a teacher to be able to explain some of the language, to be able to pause the show and give some context or some clarifications as to meaning, to take questions from the students in the room, which would be different questions here than in, say, a village in India or a big city in Europe listening to the same course. So let me say technology is an asset. It can add, it can simplify, it can make things easier, but it should be a supplement to a teacher and not a substitute for a teacher.
Very true. Could you share your perspectives on the importance of diplomacy in resolving complex global conflicts, and how do you believe diplomatic efforts can be strengthened in today's geopolitical landscape?
Well, diplomacy is obviously indispensable. It exists in order to be able to facilitate and smoothen the connections between countries, and certainly in times of conflict. If you're negotiating peace, you need to have the diplomatic skills to do it well. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that in a turbulent world of conflict, ultimately politics is determinant. Diplomats can do a good job once the political will exists to make peace. But to put it all on the diplomats, when the politicians leading certain countries or movements are determined to fight, it's not going to get you anywhere. A diplomat can execute a task or a mission and can do it well, but a politician in most countries is the one who decides whether peace is going to be feasible or not.
As a prominent leader in public service, what key qualities do you believe are essential for effective leadership, especially in the context of diverse and multicultural societies?
Well, there are so many qualities all leaders need, but I would say that one is certainly the ability to listen. We often think of leaders as somebody who stand on a high pedestal and exhort and urge, and people follow and so on. But in real life, you need to also see what's on people's minds, appreciate the impact of the policies you're about to pursue. Indeed, justify the policies in terms of what people actually need. So to my mind, that listening is very important. A second thing I believe is the ability to share credit for what you accomplish. It is often said that leading by example is the way to go and so on. Yes, all very well. But when results are accomplished, everybody on your team must feel they're equally responsible for those results. That the ultimate outcome is a collective victory and not just a victory for one individual. So the true leader is one who says we and us and so on much more than saying I and me. And I think that's a very important distinction we too easily lose sight of, particularly in the egocentric world of politics. Finally, I think that this team building spirit I've talked about, this association with others, making partnerships, the listening, all that is part of a larger sense of responsibility. One is not leading only for one's greater glory. One is leading because one wants to make a difference for people, for society, for your nation, whatever the context of the leadership is, even for that matter for your company. A leader is somebody who is always animated by a vision of the greater good that he or she then strives to fulfill in partnership with a team. And that vision of a greater good is indispensable. If your only motive is success for yourself, then you are not a leader, in my view. And those would be the three things I would particularly harp upon today.
Certainly excellent words in an excellent form, of course expressed by His Excellency Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who were in conversation with us, the former Undersecretary General at the United Nations and Member of Parliament, Thiruvananthapuram, India. Thank you so much, His Excellency, for connecting today.
Thank you. Very good to meet you.
Pleasure is mine.